Three, two, one, and we're on. This is the Oneness Talking Point with Melanie Brockwell, episode 16. Just looking at my wall calendar. And the topic is illusion. With an I. Illusion. I'm thinking specifically about that story. That what it looks like is going on is an illusion. And if we could reveal the truth behind that veil of illusion, then we would be able to see what's really going on. And as always, if that's the story that makes sense to you, then that's the truth, and there's no one arguing with your sensibilities. From the oneness perspective that makes sense to me, illusion is unnecessary. So even in saying what makes sense to me, there's no me necessary in that story. The all that is, as the whirlpool of what seems to be me, is not an illusion. The all that is in the whirlpool of what seems to be me is what is. If there's a so-called limitation of perception, that's on purpose. That's an aspect of the perfection of the whirlpool that appears to be me. And I guess the ocean is the closest thing that I can come to with some kind of analogy of how that works. Because I think, a lot of the stories on the planet have this kind of cellular or macrocosm, microcosm picture of the universe, where the further out you get spiritually into the divine, the less form it has, the less identity it has, and then you come through these layers of mediation until you get to the physical. So in oneness, there's no such thing. We understand that the seemingness of what we have divided into physical and non-physical is just a category of, the necessity of perception of the wave that seems to be something other than all that is. So even within physics, the division between physical and non-physical is arbitrary. It's something that exists because of space-time, time-space. It's not an actuality. So the physicality of something, the cellular, molecular physicality of something, only exists because of a time-space perceptual necessity. It can't be said to exist in and of itself beyond that necessity. But if we come back to that, so-called spiritual explanation of the cellularness, where the self is a self and it has aspects and connections and layers and dimensions. And all of those things are real in the spiritual story. In the oneness story, all of those things are simply a necessity of the perception of all that is, having an experience that seems to be an identity. none of those things actually exist. So you're not kind of coming down from a divine point into a self-identity and then back out again. There's no separateness. There's no boundary. In oneness, you can see, recognize that flow, that torus, is all that is. And if it seems to be coming to a point, and it seems to have a body, and it seems to have an identity, and it seems to have a boundary, then that's what it needs to do. It needs to seem that way. So there's no sense of illusion in that. There's no sense that you're being duped. There's no sense that there's something else to perceive. The perception that you're having in the oneness experience is on purpose. And everybody else's, even though there's not an everybody else, in the perception of having everybody else, all of their perceptions and rules and realities that make sense to them are also just all that is having that experience, for want of a better word. So this cellularness looks at the world and says there are small compartments. So whether they actually be cells or people. And so, there's a version of the story that sees people as these cells, or their beliefs as these cells. And if you put them all together next to each other, you form the whole, and you could see the spectrum. Or if you added them all together, you would make the whole, and you would see the divine. Or if you could somehow arrange them into a pattern and see them from a particular perspective, then it would make sense to you and you would understand all that is. In oneness, there are no cells. There's no boundary around that identity. It's more like the ocean. Although we like to think of the ocean as a collection of drops, there's no drops in the ocean. It's just the ocean. And if, there's rain or you take a cup out, it's still the ocean. There's nothing cellular about it. So you can get down to the molecules and chemical structures, and if you want to do that, you just have to keep diving until you get to the point where the contemporary investigative methods and tools don't allow us to see any further, and then you have to make assumptions. But just on that very notional level, the ocean isn't a collection of drops. There aren't separate bounded circles of water that stay themselves, that remain themselves, that have an outside, that all kind of rustle up against one another. There's no separateness. It's fluid. It's whole. Up in the sky as rain, inside the tree, as us. The ocean is fluid and whole. Back to itself. There's no separate parts running around, like this drop or this circle went to Tibet and then it did that got frozen, went down the glacier, became part of someone's tea, got taken on a plane, peed in San Francisco, back into the ocean, up in the rain, collected in a desert. Like there's no one circle of water that can be traced. The ocean is not a collection of drops. It's the wholeness. And it can have a cup removed from its body, the body of water, and put somewhere else. But it's not singular drops. I'm not sure if this is coming across in the way that it's going to make sense, but it's a cup of water of the ocean, and then it gets absorbed and reintroduced as liquid again in some other, like, no matter what form it's in. So whether it's tied up in a tree, or it's within our flesh, the thing that we think is flesh, it's still the ocean. It's still not separate little drops or circles of water. And there's no illusion to kind of put all those drops together and see through into the wholeness of it, into the divinity and sacredness of it, into the truth of it, into a place where there is no suffering. I think there's no sense that you're getting it wrong when you're having that experience. Whether it's the desire to see through the illusion, or actually seeing through the illusion, or any other story that involves the concept of illusion. I'm not saying that that's wrong. I'm saying that in the oneness experience, it's unnecessary. So there are other experiences being had by all that is, where it is necessary. And from the oneness experience, the value of those things is accepted, intrinsically. There's no sense of correction required. There's no sense of re-education or higher or lower understanding. If that is the experience of all that is, then that's what is. Full stop. There's no end of the sentence. Very often we come across knowledge that promotes the end of a sentence. If this, then that. And often that if this, then that story includes some kind of benefit or betterment. And from my own comprehension, there's no betterment in oneness. There is what is, the necessity of what is, the meaningfulness of what is, the purpose of what is, the allowing of what is, the awareness of what is, the beauty of what is, the pain and suffering of what is. So maybe this week is about figuring out what that illusion means to you, where it fits in your cosmology, where it fits in your belief system. Is there an illusion that you're required to see through in order to reveal what's really going on in your story, or not? Are you having the oneness experience that accepts illusion is unnecessary? That even, truth is this kind of unknown thing. And we accept that. We accept that it can exist for other people. For all that is having the experience of being what we call other people. And even, for ourselves, like if there was a point in the so-called before now when we carried that idea around, that illusion is something we need to see through when we have the wisdom to do so. So where is it playing in your reality, in your cosmology? What importance does it play? Does it frustrate you as someone who believes that physics is law and that physics is separate from these kinds of conversations? Do you think that this is real and that some belief in, interventionist energetics is fantasy? Some belief in origin is the result of fear and uncertainty and the want for answers we don't have scientifically yet. What's the story that makes sense for you? What's the story that brings you peace? That when you hear it, you know for sure that's what it is for you. And for many, that will be, it's not just what it is for me, that's the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, and I'm going to impose it upon you, because if you don't get it, then you need to be taught. For many people, that's how they know what their truth is, because they come to that point of frustration that, why can't people see this? I'm going to teach them. I'm going to put this out there and make them understand. Because they're living under an illusion if they don't. See how you go. Let's just make this a short one. See how you go with illusion, and just let me know. Let me know what happens when you have this cosmic conversation, when you have this mental argument, or mental filing. For some people, they have a concept of mentality, and there are files of information, whether it's in memory or Akashic record or somewhere else. Where do you go to have this conversation, to find the information that's relevant for you around illusion?